Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just back again with another video. I just want to talk a little bit about bottom-up obstruction and, just kind of hearing what's going on in the debates and, a few that I've been on lately. This is important to just clarify. I think getting on these debates and hearing a lot of different opinions and all that kind of stuff, what I like to do is boil them down to a technical difference that we can appreciate, touch and feel, experience, test ourselves. And this one is probably maybe the most important technical difference between people who are bull earthers and flat earthers. And then I'm going to do a thought experiment that can motivate a person looking into this, and then do just a quick mathematical formulation, just of the number of variables that we would consider, and then versus we as flat earthers versus a ball earther, a globe earther. And so this is not new. I've heard a couple people use this. I've used this on Rumpus a long time ago, and then I've heard other people walk people through this type of thought experiment, and I think it's a very, very good one to motivate bottom-up obstruction across a flat surface. And so all you need to conduct this is an open-minded person, and so therefore not a paid government shill, which are a majority of the people that we interact with on these hangouts. That is their job, that is their vocation, to propagate the ball earth lie. And a thin wafer. You don't need to have one physically, but just a mental picture of one. And really this is all you need to kick off this thought experiment. So first thing, just ask the person to imagine themselves on a flat plane, which a lot of us, now know that we live on. But, for some it might be new to even visualize that. So imagine that we live on a flat surface, and in this case I just use 5 miles. The distance is somewhat arbitrary, but significant enough to where seeing things along the ground would be impossible. And so ask the person to get in that mental space, and then just tell them that 5 miles away somebody has just put a wafer that's a half an inch thick on the ground. Ask them, would they be able to see that, and so this is the first step that we're going to engage this person, probably thinking of a new thought, that they've never imagined. And so this is the setup. And so now we're going to walk through these questions. And so, like I said, the first question is, could you see just one wafer standing on the same surface that is straight, flat, horizontal? I didn't use level on purpose because ball earthers have a different definition for level, so we don't want to confuse that. So, but straight, I think, is understood. Everybody knows what a straight line is. 5 miles away, and if they answer yes, then run away because this person's trolling or they're mentally unstable if they would say that. And again, we're talking about, just with the human eye. This is just no extra devices involved. And so if they answer no, which everyone will, that's good. And so now we iterate. What if we stacked another wafer? Would this one be visible to you? Again, their answer will be no, because now you're still dealing with something that's only 1 inch thick. That's 5 miles away. And so now, finally, we asked, what if we stacked 1 million of these on top of one another and formed a wafer structure that's approximately 42,000 feet high? Could you see that there is a structure in the distance now? Again, we can assume, the atmosphere is ideal. Really, in most atmospheres, we'd be able to see a structure this tall. So, but if they bring up questions like that, assume it's a clear day. And so, their answer will be yes. And then what we tell them now is that unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, they have just shown that objects have a preference to be seen based on their height. And so the half-inch wafer, the 1 inch structure, was not visible, and then for many, many iterations until an appreciable height was reached. And so if they refuse to answer no, if they answer no or refuse to answer, then we're probably dealing with a government shill, a troll, or a stupid person. And I've encountered this many times with Dean, who's Stingray on these hangouts, and others. They won't go through this because then they know that there's a variable that needs to be accounted for that they're not accounting for when they do their preaching really on the ball earth. And so this is the thought experiment. The important thing mathematically, if one were to do this modeling, to see, to explain, to reproduce this kind of thing with a mathematical model, these are in the minimal amount of variables needed to do that. And so the distance, from the observer's eye to the top of the wafer, I call D1, to the bottom of the wafer will be D2. They would be approximately the same. And then C1 and C2, I call the channel that those light rays would be going through to reach the observer's eye. They could be fairly similar. They could be different depending on the height of the structure. Never would they always be exactly the same. And I called alpha 1 and alpha 2 the angle from the horizontal that the observer meets, the observer's eye meets to the top and the bottom of the structure. And so this is the absolute minimum. Like if a person, no one would ever be funded to do this, because obviously this would go against our entire structure. But if a person were to model, what can be seen across a flat plane, these are the absolute minimum number of variables that would be needed in order to, produce accurate results. And so this is what we as flat earthers would say, that the alpha 1 and alpha 2 are absolutely crucial to include and distinguish from one another, and so it's not just D1 and D2. And so this, these are the minimum number of variables. And so if we assume a channel, and so let's just say in this case, this day, this time in the day that these light rays have a disposition to bend down, then it makes as you can see here, it makes all of these wafers at the bottom even harder to be seen, because these light rays are being attenuated and then shot basically into the earth. Whether this is water or physical earth, it doesn't matter. And so let's just say hypothetically that this channel, let's just use a generalized situation where all the light rays have a desire to bend down that day, then it's going to make, what I'm trying to say is it's going to make these bottom wafers even harder to see. And they weren't visible at the beginning. So this first and second wafer, the person already admitted they can't see it. And so when you have an atmosphere, it's going to make even more of these wafers that are stacked on top of it not visible. And so it's going to increase the amount of, quote, disappearance at the bottom, at the base of this wafer structure. And so the top could still be seen, even without a channel, an imperfect channel. And, because the light ray will still bend down and not be, absorbed into the earth or anything like that. So it may not affect the visibility of the top of this very high structure, but the bottom will always will always disappear first, and so we've seen that just simply by these angles, and then so these angles, and then also with the channel, it can make the bottom up always disappear first, and it's going to make it even potentially harder, when we include a non-ideal atmosphere. And so this is the main sort of intuition for why objects will disappear bottom up across a flat surface, because height gives automatic preference for visibility, and that's just the way it is. That's just the way our eyes are designed, and what it boils down to are these angles. That if this theta 2 is very tight, and required to make delineation between this wafer and the earth, and this distance is appreciable. Obviously, if this D1 and D2 were only a couple inches and we were right next to this wafer, or the person putting them down, we would of course be able to see them. But as D1 and D2 get bigger, and which can make this angle very tight, alpha 2, then the visibility of these wafers diminishes or completely disappears. And so that's not the case for this alpha 1, because even if D1 gets very large, this angle will still be appreciable enough to be able to see that there is an actual structure there. So these two angles are the exact things that the ballers disregard. So this is the way these liars that come on these hangouts would formulate this. If they were, let's say they're doing this for their PhD or something, their advisor, they would sit down and, in MATLAB or whatever, they would start with these variables. They would not include this alpha 1 and alpha 2 on the flat earth, because then once a person does do that, then they would see that objects can indeed be obstructed bottom up across a flat surface, and then it would call into question their assumption that it's the earth curve that's blocking these wafers closest to the surface. And so this is their trick, basically. This is what it all boils down to. And so if you ask a baller to go through this thought experiment, and then they refuse to acknowledge that these angles, alpha 1 and alpha 2, are incredibly important and really govern the visibility entirely, then there's really no point in discussing further, because then they're going to keep asking us, people who get in these debates, why is this blocked? Why is this blocked? Why is this blocked? They will never entertain the fact that this alpha 1 and alpha 2 being different, and alpha 2 not being sufficient enough to be able to see what's going on down at the bottom of this structure, limiting our ability to see the base. And so they won't explore that option, and so really there's no point, honestly, in talking any further, because they are limiting the number of variables, the quote, what I call search space. And so you're dealing with a person who they claim to be very big in models and predicting things and all that kind of stuff, but they will not include enough variables in their model, in their mathematical framework, just from the beginning. And so we know exactly what they're doing. I think it's very, very obvious to people that they're pushing a lie. Any form of obstruction bottom up is automatically cited to be earth curve, when that can be very easily explained, again, with a correct mathematical foundation, and things that are going on in the atmosphere, which I labeled C1 and C2. So I'll put Life is Short's video, or his channel, link below. It's a person who's done the mathematical underpinning of how objects he's seen, in many different tests, different ways. He's proven it and shown that this is the case. This is exactly the variables that were needed. He tried his best to eliminate C1 and C2, and then just focus really on D1 and alpha 1 and D2 and alpha 2. And he's shown it. So we have a person on our quote team that has shown objects can indeed and do indeed disappear bottom up across a flat surface, and it's made even worse by things going on in the atmosphere. We've not seen a single explanation from ball earthers explaining how things, visual things, images that we've seen where objects are not obstructed, and so they have to resort to like infinite refraction and all these other things that are non-physical and just really voodoo, and they're just grasping for straws. And so I would say the flat Earth is very, very solid mathematically, and any instance where we do not see obstruction, even for 1 or 2 or 3 miles, that's strong evidence of flat Earth. And then we have examples of much more than that, with the black swan, 9, 10, 11 miles. And so that's the flat Earth is a very, very good foundation, and mathematically, and then also for those spiritual and religiously inclined, the Bible supports a flat stationary Earth from beginning to end. Hope everyone's doing well. Take care. Bye.